What did you witness or overhear as a child that still haunts you today as an adult? My grandparents having sex, nothing more to be said. I accidentally walked in on my mom and stepdad. Saw all the genitalia. They didn't notice me and I froze up, so I got like 10 seconds of it recorded in my brain forever. My man. From my bed, if the doors were both open, I could see my parents' bed. I heard noises and woke up one night, and saw them going at it. Made sure my door was closed every night from then on. I can only imagine why you asked that lady to be your mom instead of your actual mother. My parents have a story each that they tell from time to time regarding their childhood. My mother was playing outside one day when she looked up and saw what she thought were fireworks. She thought they were pretty. But then she noticed other adults coming outside and crying or yelling. Turned out a plane had blown up just above her hometown. The kids were ordered inside and apparently the adults were asked by the authorities to go up on their roof and look for debris. My grandfather found not just plane pieces but body parts on his roof, which apparently my mother caught sight of as he was cleaning them up. My dad's story is much more straightforward. He walked into the garage one day to discover the family car running, despite all the garage doors and windows being shut. He turned the car off and then discovered that his father, my grandfather, was in the trunk, apparently intent on killing himself. My grandmother apparently came into the garage at that point and immediately ordered my dad out. However, they never talked about it afterwards and denied it ever happened, something which shook my dad pretty badly. For what it's worth, my grandfather did live a long life afterwards, and he seemed happy for as long as I knew him, which, granted, was several decades after this event took place. When I was 9 years old, my mom had a hysterectomy, so my aunt came over to babysit me for a few days while she was in the hospital. The day my mom was supposed to come home, she called the house and asked to speak to my aunt. My aunt is hard of hearing, so she put the phone on speaker. As I was walking away, I heard my mom say, "She can't hear you, right?" My aunt replied no, and my mom proceeded to tell her that there were complications with the surgery, and that the night before as she had gotten up to go to the bathroom, her stitches had come undone. She bled out onto the floor and a nurse found her on the ground. She was worried she wasn't going to make it. I'm not sure why my aunt didn't think I couldn't hear all of this while the phone was on speaker. I pretended I didn't hear anything, and ran up to my room, crying the entire night thinking my mom wouldn't come home. Everything turned out fine, and she was back home a week later. But at 9 years old, overhearing her describe that situation still haunts me. My mom's boyfriend at the time decided a good punishment for me at about 7 was to lock me out of the house, in a super thin nightgown, at about 10 p.m. in winter. Luckily my grandparents lived across the yard, so my barefooted self walked through the snow to ask if I could stay with them. Obviously my grandfather was outraged, so he went over there to knock some sense into the guy. I was dumb and went back to the house to see my mom standing between my grandfather and her boyfriend holding a knife to her wrist and basically saying if my grandfather tried to do anything to him she'd kill herself. That's just one of many fun stories I have of that lovely man who is now my stepdad. Man, F that guy. And what's your mom's deal? Some people are just so weak. Their priorities are all warped. My neighbor recently left her kids to her mom to be with her deadbeat boyfriend. Her eldest son beat the crap out of him after he beat her up, but she still chose her boyfriend over her kids. I think I was 6 or 7 years old and was going to the grocery store with my mom and grandma when we saw a really bad accident. A kid, who hadn't been wearing a seatbelt, flew out the windshield and landed in front of my mom's car. My mom ripped my shirt off and ran to help stop the bleeding while they tried to get help. I don't remember if cell phones were a common thing at the time, but it felt like an eternity of screaming until an ambulance arrived. I don't actually know if the kid survived, but the way his body just landed like a bag of bricks is forever burned into my brain. Edit. Thank you for the awards. I wanted to add a few things. 1. I asked my mom about it, and the boy made it. He had to have a lot of surgery, but he's alive and healthy today. 2. More than the body landing, the thing that I've never forgotten about the accident was how quickly my mom responded to the situation. She'd been a nurse before coming to the US and never forgot how to react to a person in need of medical attention. I'm very proud of my mom for her actions that day. At 9 years old, I walked in on my uncle beating my aunt. I stayed the night with my cousins often. They were 8 and 4. My aunt and uncle had just split because my aunt caught him cheating and found out he was addicted to drugs. My cousins were upset and my mom thought it might cheer them up if I stayed the night with them. The next morning I heard screaming from the garage. We went to see what was going on and seen him hitting my aunt. My dad had a friend who lived just a couple houses down, so I told my cousins we needed to hide, and we went to his house. His wife was home and I told her what was going on. She brought us inside and called 911, then my parents. My uncle was gone before the police got there, but he was arrested and sent to prison. My aunt didn't have any serious physical injuries, thankfully. My mom has been with her abusive boyfriend for about 10 years. He's not physically abusive anymore, but from ages 8 to 13 I watched him do so many things to my mom. I've watched the number of holes in the walls grow by the week. I've heard my mom scream my name, yelling at me to call the police. I've watched my mom try to burn the house down. I stopped her from doing so. She was drunk and high. But the one thing that still pops into my head is the night where she screamed my name. I came running out, and I watched him pick my tiny mother up and throw her against a shelf in a microwave. The kind of crap you see in movies where they make it look so easy to just pick somebody up and throw them. I've moved on from my past, but that one memory really haunts me. When I was around 7 or 8, I was in a grocery store during an armed robbery. My family was at the checkout when 2 people came in and started yelling and shooting. They told everyone to lay down on the ground and my mom laid on top of me, but I could see when they shot one of the grocery store employees just a few yards away from me. The robbers ran outside and were confronted by the police in the parking lot and arrested. I believe the man shot ended up dying in the store, but I'm not 100% sure of it. My parents acted like nothing happened and never talked to me about it. That's super intense. Sorry you had to go through that. I don't know if it helps, but I have training working with children, and not talking about it with you was 100% the wrong thing to do. They didn't know better back then, but you're justified in feeling any frustration or anything over that. It was a friend of my daughter's. I think she was like 5 or 6 at the time. The 2 of them were playing, and they did something normal kid dumb like pour all the mixed Legos out instead of leaving them in the big box. So I raised my voice, "Stop." My daughter paused like you expect. But the other girl cowered like the fear of God was in her, and she said really quietly, like it snuck out from instinct, "Please don't hurt me." Oh my God, it was heartbreaking to think how and why a sweet little girl learned to have such a reaction. This reminds me of growing up. I was scared to death of my parents. They severely punished or hit my sister for every small infraction, even when she was little. I was scared to death they would do the same to me, so I had complete freakouts anytime I was corrected, no matter how small the correction or trustworthy the corrector. I thought I had to be perfect to avoid their wrath, so I made every effort to never do anything wrong. I had a 36-year-old employee, and eventually, I had to learn to approach her very carefully, because if I moved quickly, she would instantly cower, then sit up and, every time, say, "Sorry. It's not you." After the 3rd or 4th time, I had a meeting with her and a female HR rep, I am male, and said, "I'm not trying to get into your personal business, but I have to ask. When I approach you and you react, is it because of something happening now? If it is, we can help. If you want." Totally deadpan, she says, "No. It's not like that, but if my father ever comes here to the office, I'll take you up on that offer." Gets up and walks out. Just like that. She doesn't work for us anymore, and I hear she and her family are doing great, but I get violent thoughts of being the instrument of that poor woman's retribution when I imagine who her father is and almost wish he had come after her at work. Edit. Thank you for the awards, kind Redditors. My dad, why is she so ugly? I was 8. I went to the mirror and cried. It was the first time I ever realized that I could actually look at myself with judgment. It never stopped. My mom picked me and my sister up from elementary school, and when we got home I ran upstairs to say hi to my dad, who was usually at his PC in their room. He wasn't there, so I ran into their bathroom and apparently found my dad with his wrists cut in a full bathtub of water. The only thing I can really remember about that day is the visual of blood spots on wet white tile. I'm so sorry that happened to you. I hope your family got you whatever help you needed after that, and I hope you don't blame yourself. Not at all. It sounds messed up, but unfortunately he survived and made more attempts than I can count. Eventually Mom left Dad and then I was the one calling 911. He made his last attempt a successful one a few years ago, by driving his car into an underpass. I had to identify the body. Half of him stayed in the car and the other half into the pavement. His last wavy of cruelty was when there was a dip in the cover between halves and I realized what happened. That's effing horrible. My God. I can't even imagine how horrible that is. If it helps. I've been struggling with suicidal ideation since my COVID diagnosis, and hearing crap like gives me a lot more to draw on telling myself not to do that. Imagining someone having to ID a body. It's horrible and it's exactly the guilt trip I need to give myself. Thank you. Edited to add, I'm working on this issue with my doctor, and I am not in any danger, in case anyone gets report happy. When I was 10 or 11, someone I met in a chat room sent me videos of child pornography, including a 4-year-old. I still remember the images, but at the time I didn't realize what it was. Though I knew it was wrong, I couldn't say why, but it just didn't feel right and I cut contacts with him. I realized a few years later that those videos weren't kids having sex with adults like he told me, it was a pedophile raping kids. And I think that he was the father, and the victims were his daughters, same man and same room in both videos. I really wish I could report him, but there's no way I can find the traces again. It's been over 15 years and the computer I used is long gone. I know I probably mean nothing to you, but I am so proud of you for trusting yourself enough to cut him out. So many children put up with things that make them uncomfortable because of the authority or affection of an adult. This isn't a failing on their part, it's a tragedy. But a kid who can say no and walk away from it, and stand up from themselves? That's amazing and heroic. You should not beat yourself up for failing to report. Simply not becoming a victim is heroic enough. I have a lot of guilt for not saying no when another kid was inappropriate with me when I was younger than you were. Hearing stories of kids standing up for themselves makes me feel better. It's one less person in the world who felt the guilt that I did. Breaks my heart seeing how many parents were their child's first heartbreak/trauma. In middle school, me and a group of friends skipped school one day to go to play a soccer match. One of our friends arrived late to the match and with the first touch of the ball he literally blew the ball. He made it explode with one kick, so we couldn't find anything to do. Then he suggested to go to swim in the swamp. We all agreed BCZ, it was hot that day. When he suggested it we all thought he can swim like it's a normal thing for him. Turns out he couldn't swim and drowned that day, and we couldn't do anything BCZ. We were like 12 years old at that time, and we have no idea how to save someone. I was about 6 at a party at my dad's secretary's house. He thought it'd be funny to throw me, fully clothed and unable to swim at the time, into the pool and laugh at me in front of everyone. I was so humiliated and embarrassed that my own father would use me as a prop to make his moron friends laugh. I later found out he was effing his secretary on the side and is the father of her daughters. My dad beating my mom. My gran calling my dad weak and a coward the day after he took his own life. That day I said F you and meant it. When I was in 3rd grade, my class took a field trip to a history museum in the capital of the state I lived in at the time. After the tours were over, and we had eaten lunch, we piled onto the buses and started to leave. To put it nicely, the capital wasn't a very nice place, high crime rate, bad roads, worn down houses, that kind of stuff. Anyways, the bus was stopped at a stoplight and my friend and I were playing the alphabet game, so we were naturally looking outside the window at the time. Should have just slept the way back, because we saw a guy get mugged and stabbed right at the crosswalk. Parents and teachers started to freak out, one parent vomited, the bus driver just floored it out of there. Kind of screwed everything up at the school for the next few weeks, the word got out real fast, and we had to have an assembly about it. Occasionally still have nightmares about the whole thing, never found out if the guy ever got medical attention or not, so it's possible I watched a man die when I was just a small kid. To this day I can't drive through that city, If I have to get close to it in any way, I take a different route. Being called a useless evil child that only gets his siblings in trouble. So weak and frail and useless. My baba said this about me to my auntie. It sounds harsher in Russian. Sounds pretty harsh in English, too. Trigger warning. My mother grabbing a handful of my sister's hair and pounding her head on the floor with one hand and my stepfather's revolver in the other hand, screaming that she knew my sister had been out in the woods f***ing boys. My sister was 11 years old, had snuck out to have a cigarette. My mom was very intoxicated at the time. I, female, 15, was getting my impacted wisdom teeth out. I was awake and the numbing agent didn't work on me. I was telling them that I was in pain and not numb. Finally, they told me that if I didn't stop crying I would have to come back later to have them finish. I ended up disassociating. I remember hearing them laugh at how dramatic I was being and that I was just weak. Turns out I have a genetic condition that makes me not respond correctly to local anesthetic. I have PTSD related to dentist and dental care due to this. At a family cookout, my grandmother was talking to my uncle about the time she was raped. I was sitting right beside her. I heard it all. No one has ever remembered anything so vividly ever since. Never have I ever been so pissed at humanity for what people do to others until that point. Edit. Forgot to mention that she was talking about it to the uncle who was the outcome of the unfortunate event. I don't know why she did not get an abortion or something, but I am glad she did not because he is an amazing family member. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to be the first to know about Red Rabbit Reader's new videos. If you like our videos, please like them on YouTube and share them with your friends. We welcome your comments below. Press to start another of our videos.